powerful. And you can see it in the way everybody lives in this country, except for very few. The top 1%, of the richest people in this country, just think of this, have financial wealth equivalent to the combined financial wealth of the bottom 95%. Now, can anybody make the case that 1% of the people is as important for our political economy as the bottom 95%? And it's just getting worse. The problem is that we're in a trap. It's a political trap. As we speak, 18 million school children are being given materials from Scholastic magazine about the presidential race because the teachers want to have mock elections for the 4th graders and 5th and 6th graders. And I was in Fargo, North Dakota a few days ago, part of our 50-state campaign. No other presidential candidacy goes into all 50 states. If you run for president, you should respect all the voters in all the states. Don't start playing blue state against red state. And this mother comes with a 9-year-old boy from western Minnesota, a little town. And she introduced herself, and she said, my son wanted to vote for you in his grade, but the teacher said that he couldn't vote for me, that he had to vote for either McCain or Obama. And then she takes out her little research compendium, and she shows how page after page, the assumption is there are only two parties. Page after page, millions of children are growing up being told only one of two can win, and the others don't exist, or they're insignificant. In the history books in our schools, we are told again and again that what spearheaded politically the abolition movement and the women's suffrage movement and the worker and farmer progressive advances, what spearheaded every social justice movement in our country, other than perhaps the GI Bill of Rights after World War II, whether it's progressive taxation or direct election of senators, or Social Security or Medicare or unemployment compensation, or regulation of outlandish business practices, again and again, it was all small parties. They never won a national election. Aren't we glad that a few voters spun off from the Whigs and the Democrats and voted for the Liberty Anti-Slavery Party in 1840? Or spun off from the Republicans and Democrats and voted for the parties advocating women's right to vote? Yeah, I think most of us would say that. But flash forward to 2008, and I still get questions from the press as if we're interlopers, as if our positions are not supported by a majority of the American people, unlike those of McCain and Obama. As if somehow we're second-class citizens can be described as spoilers. Imagine, the two parties, year after year, have spoiled our politics, spoiled our elections. Look at the mess in the whole election situation. They can't even count the votes accurately if they assume that they want to. And of course, they've spoiled the government. Our government now is controlled by corporate power. Every department and agency in the government, including the Department of Labor. These companies are very, very determined that the only way they can control us is to control our government, because our government is supposed to be the countervailing force, the circumscriber of corporate crime and corporate excess and corporate greed. And how do they do it? They do it in three ways. One, they put their company officials in high government positions. So the head of Goldman Sachs sells out his holdings in 2006, Hank Paulson, for $600 million, and goes to Washington as Secretary of the Treasury. And he's busy now bailing out his buddies in Wall Street. Would you like to have that kind of representation? And the same is true for Department of Defense, Department of Interior, Agriculture, Food and Drug Administration, OSHA. They put their people in charge. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, there's very, very little difference. And also they have 10,000 political action committees funneling money with quid pro quos, like the oil company political action committees or the insurance company political action committees into the coffers of these politicians. And then for good measure, they have 35,000 full-time lobbyists. And citizen groups have about 1,000. For Sierra Club, ACLU, Public Citizen, Common Cause, and so forth. Now, it's easy to be overwhelmed by all this, but it's easier not to be overwhelmed by all this, because if we are overwhelmed by all this, we're going to continue having less than adequate livelihoods and less than adequate recognition of our own personal priorities. It really isn't a very good way to live in the richest country in the world, having a job and a half at Walmart wages, rushing around trying to pick up the kids at $500 a month daycare centers, stuck in traffic commuting back and forth, and then not be able to pay one's bills. And that's the kind of lives that millions of people are living in our country today. 1 out of every 3 full-time workers makes Walmart wages, 7, 8, 9, 10, under $11 an hour before deductions, very often without any health insurance, without any retirement. And what you see is an increasing demoralization by people, increasing cynicism, and cynicism is exactly what the power structure wants us to exude, because the cynic, next step is withdrawal. Pox on all their houses, they're all corrupt, I don't want to have anything to do with them. Then they withdraw, create a vacuum, and the rascals move in. Power abhors a vacuum, Lord Acton once said many, many years ago in England. Now, let me give you an example to bring down to size what we need to do in this country. First, we need to vote our conscience. You know, someone once said, I can't vote my conscience. I said, well, what do you vote then? Do you vote your fear? Do you vote your least worst choice? Do you vote your ignorance? What do you vote? Do you vote your grandparents' party label? You know, Republican, Democrat, hereditary voters? How can anybody not vote their conscience? Because they're looking over their shoulder and they think everyone else isn't voting their conscience. That they're practical, they're tactical, they're Republican forever, Democrat forever. And you know where that ends. That ends up that very few people will vote their conscience. You should vote for who you believe in, for someone who's worked for you, for someone who has fought for you, for someone who stands for you, for someone who's authentic, for someone who doesn't sell out, for someone who knows what he says and says what he knows. That's who you should vote for. It may be Ralph Nader, Matt Gonzalez, it may be your local representative or local candidate, but I was told when I was growing up in nearby Connecticut by my parents that you vote for the person who is going to represent your legitimate interests and the interests of our country here and in the world, around the world. Unfortunately, that's not what the two parties tell you. The two parties basically encircle you in a cul-de-sac and say, be practical. You want to vote for a winner? It's either Republican or Democrat. And as a great civil rights leader said in Flint, Michigan years ago, before a big assembly, he said, the two parties keep telling us to vote for the winners. And we do. And we keep losing.